Think back on these times and the dreams we left behind. I feel like 'cause I was blessed to get to have you in my life. When I look back on these days, I look and see your face. You were right there. Well, folks, this may not be the most popular song for some people, but I think it's very fitting for today's guest, of course. It's by the great Faith Hill, who I absolutely love. It's called There You'll Be. And it's basically talking about how they'll always keep people in your heart and stuff. And I thought it was fitting for today's guest because we're going to take a break from In the Spotlight and Hometown Heroes. And today's title will be known as Ron Luneau Tribute. And that's very fitting because after coaching baseball I think he began in 1991 for a little bit. Then he came back as a head coach in 1997. He's practically been coaching baseball for over 30 years in addition to football. So he stepped aside last week. He's decided to take a lesser role, and we applaud him for that. He always said that he wanted to give somebody else a chance, and today is about honoring him. So, Coach, I want to thank you for coming on today. Real honor as always. And first question I'll ask you is, how long did you know before you made the decision that this would be it?
I've been thinking about it for the last 3 or 4 months. Seriously, since the end of baseball season, and I didn't want to make any decisions right before my wedding or right before my birthday, actually, because I wanted to kind of have a great time with my wedding and honeymoon, and then my birthday coming up. I might have been having too good of a time, and I didn't want to make any rush decisions, but I wanted to do it fast enough if I knew I was going to go that way, so that the new coach taking over would have ample time to get ready.
Right. And Coach, before we talk about your coaching career, I think a lot of times people tend to think when you retire from coaching or you give it up that there's always a specific reason. But for you, it was really just you wanted to just take a lesser role and you really didn't want to be a head coach anymore, correct?
Yeah, I've had my fill over the years of being a head coach, and it's really, ask anybody who's been a head coach for a long time. There's a lot of responsibility, a lot of work, and teaching. This is my 30th year of teaching. It's getting harder. It's the kids. I think because of COVID, the kids are a little bit harder to deal with. There's a teacher shortage out there, and there's a reason for that. I think it's become tougher over the years. It takes more out of me during the day, and when you're not a head coach, I mean, you could ask anybody who's done both. Being an assistant coach is a lot more fun, and you're under the radar. And like this year with football, like all the kids think I'm the nicest guy in the world. They Coach knows this, he's that, he's a good guy, this and that, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And everybody else is the bad guy, so I'm okay with that, and I'm getting a big kick out of being a volunteer assistant this year with the football program.
Right. And Coach, let me ask you, it's always tough. I think sometimes it hurt for you. You were content with leaving, but it's always hard for the players sometimes because whenever they get attached to a person, and you've had some of these kids since they were sophomores, stuff like that. So, I mean, how difficult was that part of it? Because I'm sure they would have loved for you to return, but you had to do what was best for you. But it is hard sometimes because you do feel the sadness they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think some of the kids, were a little upset, but I think that they're kids, so they're resilient and they come back and they play, and I think they would play for just about anyone. We had a good run at West Haven. It was a good run. I was here for 14 years. Hopefully I'll come back in another year or two as a volunteer assistant. And it's to me, it's one of those things you just know when you're ready. And it's simple. It's like, you get mentally and physically tired. I did just turn 56, and, it's a little bit harder every day to do that. But the kids are great kids. They're the least reason why I would step down. That's the least. because the kids were great. There's not one complaint I have about the kids at West Haven or kids in general, because that's the reason you coach, is because of them.
Right. Coach, talk about the first year you coached. It was 1997. You coached Derby Red Raiders baseball team. They came off a state championship, so you had a lot of kids, or I should say you didn't have a lot of kids returning. You had a couple starters who came back, but for the most part, it was a relatively young team. But at the same time, I feel like that team probably holds a good place in your heart because they were your first team and they got through that season. It was difficult, but they did the best they could. So talk about that team a little bit.
Well, I think the year before they won that state title in '96, and I want to say 8 starters left. Even a couple of the older kids we had coming back hadn't really played varsity baseball. So it was a very, very young team, and it was a very, very tough schedule because of the 2 previous years that John had that were successful years. We obtained a really hard schedule, and our 2 out of league games were North Branford. And I remember that year, I want to say we were 3-17, and we beat North Branford twice, who was a pretty good Shoreline team, and we beat Sheehan. And we had played that year Notre Dame and West Haven, Cheshire, Shelton. I want to say West Haven was on our schedule, Amity. So it was a ridiculous schedule for a Class S team, but because John had 2 very good years before that, and then there was absolutely no one. The cupboard was bare. The cupboard was bare, and we started a bunch of sophomores and 1 or 2 freshmen and 1 or 2 seniors who hadn't really played. So
it's funny how things work out, though, Coach, because I think at the time, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, your goal, I mean, obviously you wanted to be a head football coach, but I think you were leaning towards being the boys' varsity basketball head coach. That was where you were kind of leaning towards. You had coached with Joe Borzelli for a few years. And then at the last minute, the baseball job kind of opened up. But I don't think at the time you really had a plan to be a head baseball coach. So it's funny how something that kind of happened maybe by accident became your life for over 25 years.
Yeah, I think well, I thought John was going to stay a longer time than that. And baseball, I played football and baseball in high school. I loved baseball. I loved football. Basketball was pretty new to me. And basically, Joe Borzelli and myself got the job because it wasn't like there was a long line to coach Derby basketball,
Yeah.
But what I found was I really liked coaching that fast pace basketball. I love coaching defense, man, zone presses and all that stuff. So I was getting to like basketball. So I was kind of hoping that maybe I could do that. But honestly, I always felt more of a comfort level with baseball and football. Basketball, I never had a comfort level. And quite frankly, I'm glad I never stayed with it, because I think I might have had a heart attack if I stayed coaching basketball, because it was so crazy. Don't forget, I was really, really heavy back then. I think I could have just had something on the sidelines, and that would have been it. I would have been gone, just a memory of Derby.
Well, that first year the team went 3-17, and that's the other thing, Coach, that a lot of people who have followed the game today, a lot of the kids who play, they don't realize there's a lot. You could sometimes get in the tournament now with 6 wins if things break right for you, but back then you had to win 10 games. It was you had to at least finish 500. If you didn't do that, you didn't get in the tournament, and that was never an easy chore. And your next 2 years, you were able to do that in an SCC. So I mean, that first year wasn't great, but you got that team right back into tournament mode the next couple of years.
Yeah, we went 11-9 the next year in that league, and it was amazing. I mean, I was saying to myself, we had the biggest turnaround of any team in the SEC, and we were supposed to get Gilbert to come down to us, and there was a mess up with the scheduling from the CIC. So we went from having a home game against Gilbert of Winstead to an away game against a Catholic school called St. Bernard's out there in Montville, who was one of your better Class S schools at the time. Right. And I think we got beat. Our best pitcher had gotten hurt 2 or 3 days earlier playing volleyball in gym class. So I went from having to start Kevin Stevens, okay, to a freshman, DJ Manning. That's what we had to do. We had to start DJ Manning on the mound, and I want to say we got beat 5-1 or 4-1 or something like that.
Right. Coach, let me ask you this. I mean, every sport that somebody coaches, there's pressure to win. You got to really work hard to do it. People don't realize how hard it is sometimes. But I will say this, that as far as baseball went, it had to be such a fun time for you and your coaching staff to come to practice every day. You're hitting baseballs. That you talk about exercise. That's great exercise, hitting so many balls every day. And just the camaraderie with the kids and stuff like that. So even though like you had to work hard at the same time, I'm sure you enjoy coming to practice every single day.
Yeah, I was 30 years old, 29 or 30, coming to practice every day. The second year, John D came back and helped. We had guys. We had a lot of fun. The players were a lot of fun. Those kids, I still keep in touch with a lot of those players. It was absolute fun. And it was even more fun that year because we beat Cheshire, we beat Shelton, we beat Notre Dame and West Haven. We beat some big schools. All right. I think in all the years I was at Derby, the only team we never beat was Amity. And sometimes you don't play in the SEC, everybody. So there might have been like an Xavier. I don't think I played prep when I was at Derby, but the only team that we played that we never beat that I never beat with during my program at Derby was Amity. That was the only team. So, and everybody else we did quite well against,
Right. And coach, we'll get to West Haven eventually, but just talk to me about, I always say this, pitching wins championships. Pitching is, if you don't have pitching, you're not going to win. Talk to me about, in the 7 years you were head coach at Derby, talk to me about some of the pitchers you had that stand out to you in those 7 years.
Well, the biggest one that stands out was DJ Manning because he threw so many innings. Now, this was when you had innings instead of a pitch count. And he had one of those arms that just never hurt. And I saw him last year. He's a Hamden police officer now. And he's in his early 40s now, and he said, "Coach, I could still throw, and it doesn't hurt." And I remember asking his dad, like there'd be times we'd start him on a Monday, we would close with him on a Wednesday, and then start him again on Friday. The way the games worked out, so he was unbelievable during his 5 years he was at Derby because he had he started before the rule started. He was basically a freshman twice. Because he was young and he stayed back that time. But that's a whole nother story. That was before any age requirements or grade requirements. So, but DJ was there. Kevin Stevens was a great pitcher. Larry Lucas, unbelievable lefty who beat Notre Dame that year. And it was big. I can't say enough. Pitching wins you championships. Pitching wins you a lot of games. And that's why in the last 2 years at West Haven, I had a Division I pitcher and a kid who could have pitched Division II or Division III for sure. And those two guys won a lot of games for us at West Haven. All right. The Derby guys were certainly great pitchers. But the thing is, too, is when you play in a great league, you got to get strikeouts. And that's a big thing. Balls that are not put into play. So
yeah, exactly. And again, I mean, just the level of talent you had in a school like Derby, where it's a small school. I mean, there was just so much talent over the years and especially some of the kids you coached. I think of George French, Craig Schutte. Those two were phenomenal. I think they were 4-year starters.
Yeah.
I believe even Ryan Pereira's played. So, I mean, you had so many.
Played a lot.
Yeah, you had so many talented kids who could go out there and do the job. And you talked about Kevin Stevens, and he was a very good athlete. I mean, not a bad basketball player and a tremendous baseball player.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had some good athletes. I still remember that team. The catcher was Gino DiGiovanni. First base was Larry Lucas, George French, B.J. Valenti, Jeff Stockmel, Mark Tilkey, Matty DiGiovanni was out there. Schutte was out there. So that was just a very, very good group of kids. And most of them were multi-sport athletes,
Yeah. And
George's brother, Robbie, turned out to be a good pitcher for us, too, later on. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you know a lot about pitching when you first were head coach? Or, I mean, I'm sure you went to a lot of clinics, but Head coach really has to know pitching as well, or have a real good pitching coach, because pitching is very important.
I would say my strength would be pitching, catching, and defensive type stuff as compared to offense, because when I caught, like Mr. Fay was my high school baseball coach, and I learned a lot about pitching by being his catcher. And he, like, by the time I was a sophomore and I got some playing time varsity for him, he was letting me call my own game. So I called most of the games that I caught at Derby with very little interference from him. And there would be times when we would talk about pitches that I pitched. Very rarely did he change any of the pitches that I called. And very rarely did he say I made a bad call. It was I don't know, it was something that I was just gifted with, being able to call pitches. One of my best friends, Jeff Toney, who was a fabulous high school pitcher, him and I were always on the same page. And I remember my senior year when we had a lot of injuries, but when everybody came back with about 2 or 3 games left in the season, we played North Haven, and we beat North Haven 12-1 up at North Haven, and Jeff pitched like a 3 or 4 hitter. And I could just remember Jeff and I having so much fun that night because we were on the same page with everything. We mixed up curveballs, 4-seam fastballs, 2-seam fastballs, and a changeup. And it was just, to me, it was a masterpiece of pitching that night that he did.
Yeah, and you talk about another great athlete. Jeff definitely was. And Coach, I mean, the fact that you had such good teams in Derby in the 7 years you were there, I think you made the tournament at least 4 out of those 7 years. I mean, people don't realize, because it is hard to do. And baseball, I've always said this, every sport is tough, but the toughest sport I really feel to excel at is baseball, because a lot of times you're going to fail in baseball, where the other sports you fail at times, but baseball is a game of failures. People don't realize that. It's very hard to hit a baseball. So the fact that those kids and those teams you had did so well, that's really a credit to you, the coaching staff, and to those players.
Well, I think, again, Derby always had, as far as the boys' sports goes, again, during those times, football was very good, baseball was very competitive, and wrestling obviously was very good. So those 3 sports is where we got the majority of our multi-sport athletes from, you know, and even if you played basketball, we know we didn't have great basketball teams, but that made you a better athlete. Like, I liked when our football players and baseball players played basketball as well, you know, because they got some athleticism out of it. And our wrestling program was good, so they knew how to win from that. So, again, I just think that, again, there was always a sports tradition there at Derby, which, you know, I'm hoping somehow, some way can continue. I just think that the state of society today, it's hard at smaller schools like Ansonia and Derby to still compete. You know, it's hard.
Right. Coach, I have a few surprises on tonight, and here's one. There was a couple of friends of yours right here that wanted to congratulate you, so I'm going to bring them on right now. And, of course, this is Mike and Missy Cook. So, Mike and Missy, thank you for coming on, and I know you have a few things you want to say to Ron.
Thanks for having us, Meech. Ronnie, congratulations on your recent career move. So happy for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Missy. What a lot of people don't understand is I am not retiring from teaching, and I'm not retiring from coaching. I'm just going to retire from being a head coach. I just want to be an assistant and have fun with it. And I mean, who knows? I can make a little reappearance as a Legion coach or something like that. But as far as dealing with any type of stress and craziness, I want to be the good guy, and I just want to have fun with the kids until I retire from teaching, which is probably about 8 years away.
Listen, I always tell people, Michael, I don't know if I told you this, but I said the one good thing, the one positive thing I remember about COVID, okay, when people say, oh, COVID, how it was awful. I'm not saying it wasn't awful, but the one good thing was that Ronnie and our relationship really grew tight. You know, he was in our pod. We were in our little circle, and we were together every day.
Yeah,
it was the only time, Nietzsche, that I was walking probably 3 miles a day, and I gained 10 pounds.
Well, I got to tell you the truth. That was, first of all, Missy, there's a few people I owe for my weight loss because, like I said, I'm just heavy now. I was really fat back then. But my buddy Mike DeVito, Missy and Julia, Missy Cook and Julia Soda. I would sometimes walk 7-8 miles a day because I would walk 3 or 4 with them, 3 or 4 on my own, and it felt good, and it was great. And then one night we were all sitting around a fire drinking wine about 2 or 3 weeks into it, and I made a bold prediction in May of 2020. I said to the whole pod that we were with, I said, COVID's going to be over in about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll be all set and we'll be back to normal. And here we are almost 2.5 years later, and it's kind of just.
I think in typical Ronnie fashion too, his convincing, fashion, my kids were like hanging on every word, and then like they're repeating it, saying, people are talking about it. Go, oh no, it's going to be over in 2 weeks. They're like, who said that? And they're like, Ronny Luneau. Ronny Luneau said it'll be over in 2 weeks. So
that's why,
Mike,
Well, Ron, listen, you've always been a visionary, and you were right on the money with that. But, Mike, I think what people don't realize about Ronnie is that they know him from sports, and he's coached all different sports, especially football, baseball. He's done some basketball. But his passion is helping people, especially kids, and he's done that in so many different formats. And if you had one word to describe Ronnie, I would say he's very passionate, but he's passionate about people, and he's passionate about helping them, whether it's American Legion, West Haven, any school he went and he coached, he was there helping kids, obviously learn skills and sportsmanship and stuff like that, but later on, life skills. And he has so many friends in the sports circle, and his network is so wide that you can't go anywhere where people don't respect him and like him, and he connects people to people in such a great way that I don't think he realizes how many people he's helped throughout his life. And he's just a quality guy that you never have to wonder what he's thinking, because he's going to tell you. And he's going to tell you good or bad, but it comes from his heart, and he just cares about people. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, well, I really
checks in the mail, Mike and Missy. Good job. Checks in the mail.
Yeah, I really believe that, and I mean, I saw it firsthand for many years, and in 30 years I've known him, and he's still been a great friend to me. So everything you said is very true, and I really do appreciate you two coming on for a couple minutes to congratulate him, because I know that it means a lot to him.
It does.
Hey, Ron, we got to get together soon, with Catherine, but please bring those 2 baseballs back to me.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, guys.
How about this one, though? Before they hang up, Mike came up to me at my wedding, and he grabbed me and he hugged me, and he says, Ron, I'm just so happy that you can make it today. I'm glad you were invited. And
that's
you
Mike.
never know.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Neej, Ronnie.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a good one.
All right.
See you guys. Well, Coach, now here's guest number 2, and he's been a big part of your West Haven career, especially the last few years. So here we go with guest number 2. And hey, Gianni, how you doing?
How are you?
what the heck's going up?
What's up, Coach? How are you?
How did you get a hold of Gianni?
Hey, I got my ways, Coach. I knew he had to be on here. So, Gianni, the floor is yours for a few minutes. Go ahead, my friend.
Well, I mean, how's everything going, Coach?
Awesome. It's Gianni. It's going great. We got first of all, we have a great year at West Haven High School this year, and the kids are great. A lot of talk about you. Everybody's wondering how you're doing. I got one of your tapes from you pitching, and then our football team right now is 4-0, so we're having a very good year. So, is it cold yet up there, Gianni?
It hasn't really been that cold, honestly. Just
Good.
in the mornings and at night, really.
Okay, so right now it's still conducive for you to pitch.
Yeah.
Good. And how do you like school up there?
I'm loving it up here. It's really nice.
Good.
Yeah, it's
Good.
fun.
Don't you love this, Gianni? You got coaches interviewing you. What's better than that? But Gianni, just you got to have the fortune to pitch for Coach Luneau, play for him, stuff like that. Just talk about what he meant to you in your 4 years at West Haven.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure playing under Coach Luneau the past 4 years. I mean, he's a great coach and an even better guy. I mean, it was a lot of fun playing these past 4 years, and it means a lot to be able to play for his last season coached at West Haven High. It means a lot.
And Gianni, I mean, he has said to me many times he doesn't know if he's coached a better baseball player in his life. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who's coached sports, high school sports for over 30 years. That says a lot about you as an athlete and a baseball player.
He's lying when he says that. He doesn't mean it.
No, it is true. I mean, the last time you interviewed me, Nietzsche, which wasn't too long ago, you asked me about him, and I remember I went just like this.
Yeah,
he's number one.
No.
It's hard.
Thank
It's
you, Coach.
but Gianni, it's unbelievable because I've never, and a lot of people have never seen this before. We know he was a great pitcher. We know he did a great job, and it makes it a lot of guys, if they have one or two of him on a team, it makes life so much easier. But what a lot of people did not know until I pulled out the stats, he's one of one or two guys in my whole life that I've ever heard that never struck out during a baseball season.
Yeah.
And he never did it. In 70 plate appearances, he never struck out. So there's something to be said for that. I mean, and I don't know, I'm assuming, G, that you're going to be just a pitcher up there, but there were times when I was like, I wonder if I should tell the main coach that this guy is just hitting the ball all over the place. But I said he could figure it out. The guy's a professional. That's his livelihood. Coach Durba up there, and I'm sure he knows what he's doing. So,
yeah, I'm just pitching up here.
Okay, good.
Well, Gianni, thank you for a few minutes. Eventually, I want to have you on one-on-one because you're a tremendous athlete. But thank you for giving Coach Luneau a couple minutes. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. It means a lot.
That was great surprise. I love, and gee, when did I text you? About 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, that was a big surprise though, because he looks good, and I'm sure, gee, what do you got? Another week or two left of fall ball?
Yeah, this is the last week of team practices. Yeah.
Okay, good. So hopefully we'll run into you hopefully around Thanksgiving or something like that.
I'm coming back this weekend actually for fall break.
Oh, great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Now, are you driving back, G?
Yeah.
I still want to figure out a quick ride because I think you could get a plane somehow, some way for like a 45-minute to an hour ride, but we'll see. I've driven up to Maine before. Mike, it's a long drive. It's up there. So,
6.5 hours.
Yeah.
Either way, G, we'll text this weekend.
All right. Sounds good, Coach.
Thank you, Gianni.
Bye, G.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Gianni.
Bye, G.
No problem.
Thank you. And Coach, the guests just keep coming because we got another one coming on, and you're going to love this one because who's better than Otis Jamal Baskins?
Oh, my God.
There he is.
This guy.
So, Jamal, I wanted to have you on because when Ronnie first came to Derby, I mean, you and him had a very close relationship, a big bond, and I know in a lot of ways he was like a second father to you. So
Absolutely.
just talk about what Ronnie's meant to you over the years.
Well, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on a long career.
Thanks, Otis. Thanks, Jamal.
I was surprised to hear you even retire. I'm like, this guy's never going to retire,
Well, it's funny. I just got through telling the people I'm only retiring as a head coach, Jamal. I'm going to be an assistant in football and baseball and still be around, but the head coach and stuff, I've had enough of it, to be honest with you. Yeah.
No problem. But I think Ronnie knows, and probably him and I are the only one that knows how much he meant to me, just me growing up. I can remember when I first met him. I think I was a freshman. Was I a freshman, Ronnie? I don't know.
Yes.
I was a freshman. You approached me. You were talking about the game. You were talking about practice. You were talking about my abilities. And you were like more excited than I was. I'm like, well, I think I should be excited about playing. And that was like my first, okay, this guy has a lot of energy. I never been around someone who has so much energy and love for the game and interested in other kids. And I thought that and that was my drive. I came from a really strict background. My mom, he knew my mom very well, so I was easily adapted to Ronnie's style of coaching. He was a strict guy, and I needed that, to excel at what I wanted to do. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I would be outside of that. Because at home, yes, my mom had it locked down. But you know what? Us boys outside of work, outside of home, we tend to get in a little bit of trouble. And I always felt like I needed to show up because I didn't want to let people like him down. you know. And it was only like
Ex-
3 people, and he was my number one, and there's a couple other coaches out there that I didn't want to let people down, and that's why I showed up. That's why I played hard. That's why I practiced.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it wasn't just that. I can remember you invited us out for pizza to your house. I remember the first time, like, no coach ever invited us for pizza, like, on a weekend, But that was his way of connecting with us, keeping us out of trouble. And it was great, So it was really special to me to have somebody in my corner like that. And I'm sure he did the same thing all through West Haven. And I know those kids appreciated it too. So
Exactly. And Jamal, I want to keep you on here. And Coach, you're going to love this guest because this is a blast from the past and you are going to be very excited. But you gave the name to Jamal Bascucci. And who can remember the name Menduch? Because we got Menduch right now, Claudio Mendez. And Claudio, thank you for coming on, man. I mentioned how Ronnie was like a father figure to Jamal. The first real lineman that Ronnie worked with at Derby was yourself. And that year you earned a Hoosie. So talk about playing for Coach Luneau and what he meant to you.
Can't hear you.
Oh, let me unmute his mic. Let me see. Okay. So Claudia, you got your mic muted. See if you could unmute it. I tried doing it, but it's not letting me.
Your mic.
You got to unmute your mic. You got your mic muted. Yeah, he's got to unmute it. But while he gets that situated, Coach, talk about working with Claudio the first year there because, he was such a surprise. He weighed about 170 pounds and he played like a 250-pound lineman.
Yeah, I always love coming back to Derby. And just before I talk about Claudio, I had heard about Jamal from a few different people beforehand. So I was excited to meet him, and then we hooked up, obviously being at school. But Tommy D'Onofrio always spoke highly about Jamal.
Yeah.
And of all people, and of course Jamal's going to remember this, Gino Capadagli. Okay.
Yes.
And he always used to say, Gino would be waiting there, and he had the big ears, and he was our butcher, and he was just the greatest guy in the world. And he would go, Ronnie, you got to meet this kid Jamal. He's going to be the next great one, and this and that. So I just remember I was already prepped, and ready to meet him. And then I knew his mom, and I knew the family, and it was just like it gelled. As far as Claudio goes, it was the same thing. I knew his brothers, okay? Yeah. And both of these cats were tough. That's the thing. They were both tough. And I knew Claudio would be very tough too, because there's certain things you can't teach people. And the one thing he did as a lineman, which I actually had to get him out of the habit of doing, he would lead with his head, okay? And he would just like block and use his long arms. So I would just try to get him to use his arms first and a little bit more technique. But he was also naturally tough and coachable. So when you get these guys, you can't help but be pretty good, because when you're tough and you're coachable, it turns out to be a good combination. And they're smart. They picked up things really quick. It wasn't like you had to go over things 5 times with them, just once or twice, and they're all set,
Right. So Claudio, talk to me about Coach Luneau and how much he impacted you, because again, you came out of nowhere that senior year, earned all Hoosie, and you were probably, if I had to guess, the best lineman on that team. So talk about what he meant to you.
Ryan meant a lot to me. He's one of the very few people that try to do anything for me to guide me, even trying to get into school. I love his tenacity. I love his dedication to all of us. He always wanted everybody to be successful. I've always been appreciative to him. Even after I see him coaching his kids in West Haven, I love seeing him. He brought a lot to me. I loved him.
Yeah, and Claudio and Jamal, both of you. To have somebody like that who showed he didn't just care about you guys as athletes and football players. He cared about you both on an individual level and on a personal level, and that had to mean a lot to you, because like anything else, there's people in your lives that'll impact you forever, and he was one of those guys who definitely did.
No, absolutely. Not just talking here, but when we talk about high school, your name comes up, Ronnie. When we talk about sports, your name comes up, Ronnie. So it's not just, the conversation between him and I. It's like anybody who we talk to, your name always comes up as somebody that was always there, always around. And it's just a nice thing to have, a past like that. Because like I said, my whole thing, and I know Claudio the same way and a lot of other players, people showed up for you. People can love the game, but they play for coaches. And you were one person that everybody played. And so I know I appreciate you. I know Claudio appreciate you. And even with us, me and Claudio, we were minority kids coming into Derby, a big Italian place. And just you even nicknaming us Vascucci and Menducci, like that meant more than, it was funny, but, nobody else could say that to us. Nobody else could have gave us those names, right, Claudio? Right? Nobody else, but coming from you, that meant us. Even just having that nickname. And everybody had a nickname for you. Everybody.
Yeah, I did. I gave a lot of nicknames, man. But that's, to me, it's all about kids. I mean, it's all about kids. It's all about everybody. And here's the thing, black, white, Hispanic. I love Derby because we were all the same type of people.
Yes.
And everybody was tough and everybody grew up. And it was a great time back then because we all grew up when we were younger, fighting.
Yes.
Younger, and that's all it was. And it was a great place to grow up, and people looked out for you. There were people who looked out for me, and it just got passed down. And I spoke about them last time. And to me, it was just returning a favor. And even in West Haven now, it's the same. West Haven's just a bigger Derby. That's all West Haven is, and they got a beach. Okay.
Yeah.
And 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 I feel that that's my fit. I don't feel I fit into, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't feel I fit into any of the Fairfield County towns, or I feel that I fit in with tougher kids, blue collar kids, and that's my niche,
Yeah, exactly.
And Ryan, the reason why I led with my head is because that's the only thing I had. I was 165 pounds, Ronnie.
I know. And I remember.
I had a hard head. I knew the kids didn't want to get hit.
Yeah, and they didn't want to hit you. And I remember still that year, John Oko let me go to the all league meeting, and he said, "Ron, this is who I want to make all league. So can you push them, and we'll do that." So I remember we pushed for all league, and so Claudio got voted on, and I was told, I told John, who made the team. And I said, "John, I just got to ask you one favor for Claudio. Can I tell him after the Thanksgiving game?" And John said, "Yes." And so after we beat them, we beat Shelton on Thanksgiving. And then I said, "I got one more surprise for you." And I told him he made all league. And I remember his big, long arms coming around me. Ready? Just like these huge arms coming around me and hugging me. And it was just, that was another year where Jamal was a sophomore.
Yes.
And I just thought we overachieved because it was a great job by everybody. And Charlie and John both said, "Ron, go to the meeting." And that's how I got a first taste too of politics and football and voting with other coaches,
Right.
So I don't remember any of the games, but I remember all of the practices, especially with Claudio when I would play the running back of the other team, and I remember all the practices. I remember barely.
Thank you, Jason Tinney.
Huh? Yeah, I remember I was Jason Tinney. I was what's the guy from Sean? Was it Easton, that's right.
Yes.
Easton and McIntosh.
I was
Cheshire, yeah.
And we had a good year that year. I mean, both teams. I mean, McIntosh, what they scored on it was 8-0 that game.
They beat us 14-8.
14-8. That's right.
Yeah. I think we held them to like 50-some yards.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And that was really, it was such a good time to be at Derby because literally we were still graduating 60 kids a class, and we were still very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that team definitely overachieved. Before you guys go, just real quick, both of you could answer this. Jamal, we'll start with you. Just tell me, like, looking back in your everyday life, what do you take out of the lessons Ronnie taught you?
Loyalty. Obviously hard work. That's what I would give. And anybody that comes out of Derby is hard work. But I think when you show up for people, they will show up for you later.
Yeah.
I had a rough senior year, and a lot of people that I worked hard for, they showed up for me. And that's one thing I pass the kids that I talk to, rookie cops that I talk to. People will remember you when you're not even looking for it. I was never looking for anybody to help me. I was never looking for anybody to help me. And I think that like people like Ronnie, he pushed me. And because of in the amount of respect I had outside the home. So I knew somebody was always watching. It would get back to him. So I think just having that, it carried me to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because people say, "Oh, every time you go somewhere, everybody knows you somewhere from Derby." I had a reputation, and I think that's one of the big things that Ronnie taught me. So thank you.
Right. And
Thank
Claudio,
you.
And Claudio.
Yeah, I mean, just working your ass off no matter what when nobody's looking. I tell my son, listen, team practice is not for you. That's for the team. You want to work on your game, you have to do it on your own. Go home, do all kinds of drills to improve your game. It's not for the team. You have to do that on your own. I remember every drill in practice in summer, I used to work hard on myself. Even in practices, I always worked hard on every single drill. I remember one time I was so exhausted. I'm just gonna work on my technique, and that's what I'm thinking. Like, I gotta take a breath. I'm gonna work on my technique. As soon as I did that, you called me out. I said, "Man, dude, you have never dogged, and now you can dog." Like, yeah, you got me.
I remember that.
You got me. You remember that?
I remember that.
I remember that too because I knew you were beat, and I just said I gotta ride him a little bit more because I just knew that you guys could take it. That's what I knew. I never rode the other people as much, but then when push came to shove, I made sure that in the end, like I always made sure that you guys knew that I loved you, and that's it. I mean, it's that simple. But I always felt that you guys always gave 120%. It was like it was automatic, That's why we were pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jamal, Claudio,
Yeah.
I thank you for coming on for a few minutes. And, it wouldn't have been right if you two weren't on because you meant a lot to him as a coach and as people. So
Love you
thank
guys.
for coming on.
Hey, Ronnie, if you ever want me to come out there and talk to your players, just let me know. I'll come out there.
I would love for you to meet these kids because actually Claudio was reffing a couple games when I was coaching. Yeah, and I introduced him to some of my players then. Jamal, I'll reach out to you in the next couple weeks because our kids. Here's one thing I'll say about the West Haven kids this year, which is unbelievable. We have kids with more good grades than ever before.
Really?
And they're great kids. They're weight room kids. All right, big time weight room kids. And if you come to West Haven High, it might be the most diverse high school in the state of Connecticut.
Awesome.
We've got 60 something languages. The school is about 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3, a mix of everybody. And I love it because, again, just like Derby, the kids all grow up together. It's like, and the biggest thing is, remember how in Derby it was West Side versus East Side?
Yes.
Well, here it's West Shore versus Center versus Allentown. There's 3 places.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and but it's really, really a place where most of the parents are great. The kids are great. And like I said, it's a big Derby with a beach. That's what it is.
That's it. All right. Well, I have to come out there. I definitely want to see this.
I got your number, so we'll reach out this week. All right.
All right. Awesome.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you,
guys. I appreciate
Really
you guys. Man.
Love you guys.
Oh, you too, man. Great
Thank you
seeing you.
again. Good seeing you guys. Take care.
Good seeing you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Claudio. Well, Coach,
Right.
I mean, that had to be a great feeling. I mean, those guys were tremendous players. So, Coach, talk to me a little bit about West Haven and the 8 years you were head coach. I mean, I talked to you about pitchers from Derby. Just talk to me about some of the pitchers you had for West Haven.
Well, you just saw the best one was Gianni. We had a very good one that went along with him for the last 2 years, Dylan Supan, who was excellent. Again, a kid who wasn't overpowering. He didn't look the part. He just knew how to pitch, and he just knew how to throw a game, and he was an excellent, and I wish he decided to play in college because he could have pitched in college. Okay.
Yeah.
I had Hunter Axelrod. I had years, Jason Wilkerson, Adrian Urbina, Lorenzo Davis. Michael Vitola, Nick Flamia, Ty Reeves. I had some really, really good pitchers over the years. J.C. Contreras, who was a shortstop, but he pitched. Lorenzo Espinal. So we just had so many kids that could throw. But again, the difference between the great ones and the good ones is like Gianni. Prime example, the last game that we won, the first game of the tournament against Manchester, he strikes out 12, and then he gets the game-winning base hit to win 1-0. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what great players do. That's the difference. And all of those guys are fabulous players, but like he stands out. And again, there's some people who are just good enough to stand out,
Yeah. And I mean, Coach, it seems like all these guys played their hearts out for you. I mean, did whatever you asked, what the coaching staff asked. And that's the thing that's the most enjoyable thing about interacting with kids is when they have to buy into what you're doing, but they also go out there and they perform for you and they want to play for you. Because, I mean, that's a big key to being a successful coach. It's one thing to know the game of football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is, but kids have to believe in you. And if they don't believe in you, eventually it's not going to work. And these kids always believed in you.
Yeah, I think, Jamal said something that was interesting, and I think it's loyalty. I will say this, whether I'm proud of it or not proud of it, I have got into verbal disagreements, heated verbal disagreements, almost at times turning crazy, where, I was defending my players. And my players know, and if they're wrong, they also know that there's Pete, another one of my childhood friends right there.
Yeah.
But if I'm wrong, I will admit that I'm wrong with anybody. If they're wrong, I'll make them admit it and take ownership. But if they're right and I feel like they've been jilted, I will defend them. I've had a couple things with Gianni in the past where I felt that he got jilted by an umpire or two, and I made sure the umpires knew about it.
Yeah. And Coach,
Yeah.
I mean, talk to me about that year you guys win the SEC, or you have a great year in the SEC. You get SEC Coach of the Year. I mean, that had to be one of your top seasons of all time in all the years you've coached, because I mean, you know better than anyone how hard it is to win in that league, no matter what type of team you have.
Yes. If you saw the article in Game Time last week about the inequality of athletics, where the wealthier towns are winning now and everything, and your poorer towns are not winning as much. And for me, the championship game of the SEC is really kind of signified that. And again, and Fairfield Prep had a great team, and their coaching staff is classy, and they're great guys. But I remember I was saying to the head coach, my team literally is from half of West Haven. You know what I mean? From really one half of West Haven, mostly West Shore kids from a neighborhood in West Haven. And we were playing Fairfield Prep. And that day, the pitcher was from North Haven and the catcher was from New Canaan. Now, that's about 40 miles apart from each other.
Yeah.
Okay. And everywhere in between is where the rest of the players came from. And one of the kids had told me that the whole starting lineup didn't have one kid from the same town. So, I mean, we were playing against Prep, and a lot of, there's a lot of advantages of being at Prep. It's a great school and they run a great sports program. But there was definitely, I was facing we were facing a pretty loaded deck that day,
Yeah.
And I think, again, for the most part, I can't say enough about that senior class. Don't forget Johnny and Dylan.
Up a little bit. You froze a little bit. Yeah.
We're good?
Go ahead. Yeah. Yep. Now you're good.
Yeah. Johnny and Dylan were juniors, and but the seniors on that team, Tyler Jones, Danny Izzo, Michael Boney, Hunter Axelrod, my guy Ruben, my catcher Ruben. He was. These guys were great guys. They really worked hard at everything they did, and they were a good bunch of players. Good bunch of players.
Yeah, and I mean, Coach, I know you don't get caught up in the whole personal accolades and stuff like that, but I mean, you put all that work in for so long. It had to be a great feeling to be coach of the year because, I mean, like the type of work that you have to put in all the time and the sacrifice, and you're starting your day 5 o'clock in the morning, waking up, then going to school, then you finish around 2, then you're going to practice. You're not getting home sometimes till 6 or 7 o'clock. So when you have days like that, it has to feel good to be rewarded with something like that.
I mean, it was great, but really, you're not the coach of the year unless you have players that can execute and win, which I did. Yeah. And my assistant coaches were very instrumental in that year. And the other thing is who voted me in? The other coaches in the league. And I'll say this about all the SEC baseball coaches. What a great bunch of guys. Yeah. Believe it or not, that's one of the things I'm going to miss is seeing them on every other day, because so many of them were awesome to me. And I just can't explain it. I have lifelong friendships from guys that I coached against and coached with.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing too, coaches. I mean, all the coaches for the most part respect each other because they're all part of a fraternity. They know what goes into everything. They work with each other. And I think that's the other thing too, is they all like kind of back each other up when they're trying to get a kid onto their all SEC team. They support each other and they make sure that stuff happens. And that's the most important thing about it.
No doubt. And I mean, even this morning, I talked to, once in a while I get a surprise phone call. This morning I got a phone call from Tommy Brockett, the head football coach at Ansonia. I've been friends with Tommy for 20 years, and we don't even talk so much about football as we do about life, you know, and that to me is more important than anything. And I can honestly say that I love so many of the guys that I coach against and coach with, and it really is a fraternity, and I feel that way. And in the end, between the kids that I coached, these past kids, the coaches that I coached with, and the coaches I coach against, I'm the lucky one. I feel blessed. It's reciprocal. As much as they got out of me, I got out of them. And you know what? What a wonderful feeling it is to have that relationship. And that won't stop me. I'll be an assistant coach and I'll have that relationship and it'll be good. And you know what? I mean, you get anybody who tells you they're a head coach and they don't have a little bit of an ego, a little bit of a stretch that they're lying. Okay. We all have an ego because we all think the way we do things are right, but in the end, it's the other coaches. It's a relationship you have with the other coaches and your own players and your assistant. That's the only thing that matters. Your coaches, your players, and the other coaches. And nothing else matters. The fans don't really matter. The parents, they matter because they're the parents of your kids and they must have done something right. But they will never understand for the most part that their kid, some of them do, their kid is part of a team. All right. It's not that they're a lone part of themselves and then they go play for somebody else. It's really a team sport, and the parents that buy into it and understand that, it always works out better for them.
Right. Well, Coach, we were supposed to have 2 more guests. One guest was having trouble getting on, so I'll talk about him after. But this is the last guest. I had him last because I thought it would be fitting because he's played a big part in your career. You could probably figure out who he is. Just think of Ground Chuck and you'll know. So let me put him on right now. And of course, I'm talking about your great friend and former coach, Charlie DeCenzo. And Coach, thank you for coming on a few minutes.
Michael, no problem. I'm just amazed I got on. I figured this thing out.
Yeah, it could be a little tricky. But Ronny, let me start with you. You came back to Derby in 1992. You coached with Charlie. And right away, he kind of let you take the lineman over. He kind of backed off on that. He trusted you. Just talk to me about, you played for him in 1983. Just talk about the 40 plus years of friendship and what this guy's meant to you.
Well, at my wedding, as you know, Mike, because you and Charlie were both there, I said to my wife, I have to get a picture with Charlie, Tom Fay, and Sal Coppola, 3 of the guys in my life that I feel have been the ultimate mentors. And I was very lucky to be coached by Charlie and then coach with him and then teach with him later on. I think I remember one time when I was coaching up at Central Connecticut, Charlie came up to a clinic and I gave a talk on defensive line play. And I think he realized then, and actually I realized then that was like my first year. It was actually my second year coaching, my first year coaching college football, that I was able to teach and coach at the same time. So I think he had confidence in me that when I came back to Derby, that I'd be able to do that and coach the offensive line, no problem, because that's really where my passion was. Even though I played fullback, I liked line play better than anything. So.
Right. And Charlie, talk to me about him coaching with you and that your final season, coaching with him over the years, and just the friendship that you two have had with each other.
Listen, I met Ron when he was a young kid in high school. He played for me. He was one of my first captains. And right from the start, Ronnie's always been a hard worker. And as a coach, the thing that impressed me most about Ron, not only his knowledge of the game, which, listen, we went to that central clinic and I sat there and took notes from Ron just like I took from everybody else. But Ronnie gets the most out of his kids. The kids love him. He's fair with them. But he always gets the most out of them, and that to me is very important from a perspective of a coach or a head coach. You give Ron the offensive line, you say, hey, you take these 7 guys and you mold them into a unit. It's going to happen. And Ron did an excellent job for me. And as I said, if you look at Ron's success throughout the years, he's coached all the major sports, either in Derby, West Haven, a number of places. He's always met with success, and you can just see the way the kids flock to him. And he's got that personality. They love him. He's hard on them. He gets the job done. He's fair with them, and they respect him.
Yeah, they definitely do. And, you both have meant a lot to each other, and I just felt like it was important for Charlie to be on here today. But Charlie, before you go, just let me ask you, when you look back in Ronnie coaching with you or playing with you, what's the one thing that, I know it's hard, but one thing that stands out that you could say this is what he was really all about?
Well, I'd like to go back to when he was a player for me. He first of all, he came in the transition year right after Lou retired. And that year before, Ronnie was not a starter, but he was a backup that earned his way to become a starter during the course of the year. And then, of course, as I said, he was one of my first captains. But Ronnie was always a hard worker. He never was discouraged, always kept working, always kept doing what the coaches asked him to do. And it's that effort that I think he ingrained in himself and then also gets out of his kids that now play for him. So I think that's the most critical point about Ronnie.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on. I know that you have meant a lot to him for so many years, and it was really nice of you to come on and congratulate him. And thank you again for doing it.
It was a pleasure. Ronnie, thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Coach. And of course, that was the great Charlie DeCenzo. And Coach, I know how much he meant to you over the years, the 40 plus years that you guys have had in a friendship. And one of the guys, Coach, I wanted to have on as well, and I talked to him today, but he was having a little problem, was Coach George DeMayo. And he was going to hop on and say hello, but he has always said how you've been a supporter of his. And he said that was always important because when you're announcing football games, sometimes people, they tend to think you're being biased because you're giving a lot of press to one team sometimes. But he said through it all, you always supported him. You never criticized him, and you always had his back. And that meant a lot to him.
Coach DeMayo is the best. He's one of the best things for high school sports. Best commentators, best announcers. He is great for high school sports, period. Basketball, football, baseball, doesn't matter. He is great for high school sports. And like I said, I've been the lucky one. Like Charlie, one of my favorite memories was when we were still playing prep. And I had a coach against him for 6 or 7 years. But then the last couple of years against prep, Charlie had stopped coaching, and he came over and he made sure he saw me before the games. And I've always wanted to be good and to look good in his eyes because he was the guy that was my role model. And And I wish I acted even more like him at times. But there's some times when my grandmother came out, and that's not always the best thing in the world. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. But Charlie was my role model. Him and like I said, Tom Fay, and those guys were important to me.
Yeah, they definitely were. So, Coach, before we go, what would you like to say to every player you've ever coached, uh, friends that have supported you, whatever it might be? What would you like to say to all those people who have been there through it all with you and all your years of coaching, and they're going to miss you, but they're very happy that you were part of their lives in some way?
Well, I would like to say it was reciprocal. I love them. I remember almost all of them, if not all of them. And they were as important to me as maybe I was to them. I could just say that I can't say enough about how much I learned from them and how much I love. I love my players, and I think anybody who has played for me would concur that there's some bad qualities that I have like any other human being, but I think they know that I'm very loyal to a lot of my players.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you coming on. First off, congratulations on a great career. I know this isn't the end, but this is the end as a head coach. And there is a bit of sadness. There really is. I mean, I got a lot of texts that night when you stepped aside, and people were asking me, why is he leaving, stuff like that. And it's because they just enjoy seeing you all the time on the sidelines, on the baseball diamond. I mean, that's what it's all about. So I really do applaud you. And I mean, I met you in 1992. It's been a great friendship, and just a tremendous coach, but an even better person. So thank you again for everything you've done for me and so many people over the years. We really do appreciate it.
Well, Michael, thank you for everything you've done for me. Likewise, it goes back and forth, me and you. We definitely are very good friends. I appreciate it, Michael.
Well, thank you, Coach. Folks, there you have it. I mean, I could go on and on about this guy. I'll just tell you this, that if you had the fortune of having Ronny Luneau in your life, you know what? You were very blessed and very lucky, because at the end of the day, and I said this the other day when I was talking about his career and Facebook and stuff like that, he went out of his way to get to know everyone. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just an athlete. It wasn't just a football player. He wanted to know everyone in that Derby High School building. The same thing when he taught at West Haven. He wanted to know every kid. He made you feel special about yourself. And that's really what Ronny Luneau was about. He loved people, and he always has. And he's the type of guy, I could say so many words about him, but I think the best word is indelible, because he's never going to be forgotten. He's just one of those guys that will live on forever and ever. And we were very fortunate to have him in our lives. This was the Ronny Luneau tribute. I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.